All right, guys, let's get started for today. So today is our last day of lecture. It's pretty crazy to think about that. Uh, we had 4 weeks already, and we're already going to be done. So again, tomorrow is going to be our final exam. Just as a reminder, it is in person on paper during lecture tomorrow, 11 a.m. Open notes, but remember they must be handwritten or printed, has to be physical notes, no computers, no phones, none of that, right? You could bring as much as you want, as little as you want, whatever that you want. Reminder that there is free printing in the library. You just need your Q card and you get $10 worth of free printing every single semester. So no need to pay to get it printed out yourself. The exam itself, I'm almost finished creating it. It's about 3/4 of the way done right now. It'll have about that 75 questions, all multiple choice. None of those fill in the blanks or matching that have been giving issues. So no need to worry about that. There will be repeated questions already. There are some. And it is going to be cumulative. Expect about 6 questions a topic with maybe a little bit less for some of the later topics that we're doing, like today's thing. I'm not going to ask you something crazy about what we're going to be covering today when you only have one day to study it. That's not going to be something I would ask. And everything is pretty straightforward. The types of questions that you have are going to be extremely similar to what you've seen so far. So pretty much right from the notes, just kind of asking like, hey, what is this formula? What can I do to achieve this goal? Things like that. So if you've been doing good with the others, you should be totally fine for this exam. Today's lesson is a little bit shorter too, so I'm honestly hoping to have some time for review at the end as well. So if you can, on the Amplify activity, there's just a little place for what questions or concerns. What do you want us to go over? Just put like individual topics that you like to go over right here. Or if you're confident, you can say that too. Anything that you want to go over. I'm hoping that we're going to have some time to do that since today's topic is going to be a little bit shorter. Um, Otherwise, tomorrow during lab, you guys will also have some time to ask last minute questions. You'll have a little review. Um, and then we'll start the exam at 11 a.m. And you guys will have roughly 2 hours to complete it. So you'll have plenty of time. If you need a little extra time too, it's totally fine. But I think it should be okay for the time period that we'll give. So that's going to be the rest of the course pretty much. And a reminder that on Thursday, all week 4 assignments are due. So everything for chapter 11 and chapter 12 is going to be due this Thursday, 11:59. We cannot accommodate anything past this date. So unfortunately, if unless this is an extenuating circumstance, we need to get grades in. We're hoping to get all the grades in by probably Saturday or Sunday, the very, very latest. So you'll have your grade almost immediately from that. But as of now, you can pretty much see all your grades on Brightspace. I'll be syncing your grades for all of the week 3 assignments as well. So you'll be able to see those. Any manual grades as well, we'll change those. So in case something isn't changed, you don't see it, just let us know and we will fix that as soon as we can. So just give it a little bit time today and all that should be fixed. Otherwise, please reach out to us and let us know. And again, if you wanted to get the extra credit for the final exam, that's going to be for chapters 9, 10, 11, 12. Each of them is worth about 1.5 points. So you do them, you get an easy 6 points if you do them all. So all of these guys will go towards that. If you can, please try to do them before the exam. That's meant to help you guys. Honestly, as long as they're done probably before Thursday night, we'll be able to count them towards your grade. But of course, everything after Thursday will not be counted. Any questions about exam, deadlines, anything before we get started? How you guys feeling on the exam? I know final exams scary and everything, but I hope you guys feel okay about it. Any feedback, any reactions? Say it in the chat. Yeah, you're gonna do good. You gotta believe in yourself, all right? You guys have been doing really well on the other exams. There's no reason that you're not gonna do well on this one. Just keep going over the practice exams and the past exams, and you're gonna be totally, totally, totally fine. And again, if you got specific questions, let us know. Either email us, ask us in class. We don't bite. All right. Let's get started for today. Oh, Professor, I can't go back to the second exam. Oh, on Brightspace, it doesn't let you. It doesn't let you review it. Let me change that. I'll change that by the end of class during our next break. Thank you for letting me know about that. Yeah, you should be able to review the first exam though, right? The one on Pearson. Yeah, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll also change that as well. But you should be able to access pretty much everything. If you can't access something that you want to review, just let me know, and I will change that as soon as I can. But I'll change the second exam. Alrighty. With that being said, let's work on the little warm up for today. So this is from yesterday's lesson. If you need to combine up to 252 text strings into one single string, and you want to use a specific argument to insert a delimiter, like a comma or space, between each combined item, which function should you use? So we went over two of them, right? Concat and text join. Concat is going to concatenate them without anything in between. Text join, on the other hand, is going to actually put whatever delimiter you specify in between. So if I want people's names to be spaced out with a space, right? I can specify that as the delimiter, and that way, after everyone's name will be a space. So text join will be for this. Okay, so for our very last lesson of our semester, we're going to be going over two main things. We're going to be going over templates, which are a great way of getting started on pre-made formulas and pre-made pretty much sheets for all kinds of purposes that you can use for your own and create for your own as well. And we're also going to be going over what's called macros. This is going to kind of combine a little bit of code and spreadsheets. And it's going to essentially allow us to create little routines that Excel will automatically convert to code. And we can reuse these to do all kinds of procedures. So those are going to be our two main topics for today. With that being said, let's dive in. So we'll go a little bit quicker through this just because, again, the main two things that you'll be going over here are going to be just the templates and the macros, and neither is going to be going in extreme depth on the exam or on the projects or anything like that. So mainly just want to get the gist, want to get the main points, understand how to use both of these guys, and you're going to be totally, totally fine with that. All right, so just like any software, there are always going to be built-in templates, whether you're on Excel, PowerPoint, Word, etc. So rather than starting out completely blank, which we could, we know how to do these things now. We know we have the powerful formulas, the powerful filters, all of these formatting techniques. We can start with a template that is already pre-downloaded. And there's a variety of these guys, right? If I want to access them, all right, I'll go onto my Excel. Okay, let me just open that up. 1 second. All right, I'm going to go to File, New from Template. And I'm signed into CUNY, so sometimes your organization, let's say if you're working for a specific job, might have built-in templates, right? Maybe there's a specific budget sheet that your job might want to use, right? And it's in that specific format, and that's what they want all employees to use. Sometimes your organization will have those templates right featured there in Excel. So you can use them and immediately start plugging in your values, and you know it's in the way that your company has intended. Otherwise, Office, right, Microsoft's suite of programs and templates is going to have its own templates that you can use. Now, some of these are very simple. For instance, track my tasks, right? You can just list out whatever tasks that you have, and actually, it'll make little progress bars on that, right? Or maybe I want to see a pie chart of how much money I've spent. I could use a personal budget sheet, family budget. All of these guys are involving different charts that, maybe for a new user to Excel, they wouldn't know how to use charts like this, right? Or maybe you just want to make something really quick and something that looks pretty, right? You don't want to have to deal with all the formatting and have to worry about, okay, make this font, make this chart, etc. You want something quick. These are great for that. You can have all different types of managers. You can make your whole schedule on Excel. There's a calendar, timesheet, all kinds of things like this. Video game tracker. Cool. So for any of these, right, let's just say I'll go to, let's say family budget, right? This has a lot going on, right? I can create that and it'll allow me to fill things in, right? So I could type in my name in the placeholder. I could change titles, months, years, etc. Right? I know that if I double click on the chart, I can change up the axes if I wanted to change any of the things here, if I wanted to change my values, right? Maybe I'm dealing instead of thousands to hundreds instead. I could be doing all kinds of things like that, right? We got tables over here. We know our little drop downs here will allow me to filter the table, right? So I could filter by all these values. Now, these are just like practice data. This isn't our actual data. So I could change these guys up, right? But all of these guys are essentially built-in formulas. It's taking our totals and project it. So essentially, these formulas are doing all the math for us without us having to actually type the formula in. So we're going to go over about making your own formulas and templates as well. And you're going to be able to essentially say, maybe I want to make my own budget sheet that I have as a template, and every month I can create a new one following that exact same template, right? And what's great about this is I just have to literally fill in the blanks with whatever formulas I want, right? Whatever formulas I want, whatever values I want, and it will literally do all the math for me, right? It's going to calculate the expense. It's going to calculate the value. It's going to calculate anything that I require it to do, right? Calculates a subtotal, right? All these are functions that we have gone over. But, this is Excel's template, so naturally they want to make it look pretty. They want to make sure that it's put together nicely and everything. We even have over here all these little buttons, right? This is our conditional formatting. Remember, when we have lower values or higher values in a different color to make them stand out. This is kind of using that traffic light format, right? In the sense that we have red, we have green, we have yellow, and it's essentially making it a lot easier to see what's kind of going on here, right? So this allows us to immediately start inputting our data. It makes things nice and easy, and we don't necessarily have to worry about formatting all this ourselves. It's already presentable, it's already pretty. I got a beautiful piece of data over here, right? I could put my own stuff here instead. I could put in different values and everything, and essentially it'll adjust accordingly. So these are going to be our main templates, right? And again, there's so many different ones that you can choose from, and we're going to be going over making our own templates too, right? There's going to be a part over here that's going to say that You have your own templates, so you can open them up and use them just like that. All right. So if you are going to create your own template, just a couple of guidelines that you should try to keep in mind. You want to try to keep things very vague. You want to make sure that you're not using like actual data, right? You want to make sure that the user knows exactly where they can enter their own data. You want to program formulas wherever you can. You want to make it just as easy to access as possible, right? Because you're assuming that, I mean, unless it's your own template that only you are using, but some user is going to be doing it instead. So aside from the templates themselves, in all workbooks, there's going to be two features that allow us to ensure that it will also work on any other computer, right? Because that's the essential goal. We want things to be universal. Whether someone has a Mac, a PC, some other computer, whether they're using an old version of Excel, a new version of Excel, you want things to work for everything and for everybody. So this is going to be our document inspector and accessibility checker. So document inspector is making sure that there's no hidden data that's inside, right? Maybe you accidentally put a password inside your data, right? And you hid it, right? You hid your column. But someone who downloads your template or downloads your workbook can unhide that column and get your password, right? You don't want that happening. So this document inspector, make sure that it's good before you send it off. Now, accessibility checker, on the other hand, is to make sure that your document is accessible for users that might not be able to perhaps see the document fully. Or maybe they have a disability that doesn't really let them access it the way you intended, right? There are screen readers, for instance. You want to make sure that perhaps your document is screen reader accessible so someone with low vision would be able to hear what's going on, right? Maybe it needs to be in a format, right, with colors that are very easy for a user to see. Maybe someone might be colorblind, right? They might not be able to fully see a large range of colors. And if you're using two colors that are super close together, it's difficult for those users to see. So the accessibility checker is essentially going to check that, right? And see, hey, do you have any problems that might pose a problem for a user with a disability? For users that have different versions of Excel, we have the compatibility checker, right? Now, this is something that honestly Pearson should have been using because a lot of their features don't work on the newer versions of Excel, or some of them are from an older version or a newer version or not the version that we're using. Because of that, it's a little different of an experience. Some features are only PC exclusive, like that whole 3D map fiasco with Chapter 10. This is why we need a compatibility checker to make sure that what I'm doing can be done on any computer, right? If only half of the people can actually use my feature, that's not good. You want to make sure that everybody is able to use it. Now, in case someone leaves a comment on your sheet, right? Just like any document, like a Google Doc or a Word document, you can leave comments on sheets as well. If you want to make sure, if you want to see if there's a comment, right, usually it pops up as yellow on like a Google Doc or Word doc, some word processing software, but it's going to be used by a comment indicator that's going to be popping up as purple to show a comment. Well, a red triangle is going to indicate a note. The difference between the note and the comment itself, right, is that the note is going to kind of appear similar to when we had the warnings on the screens, right? Remember when we prompted user like, hey, you need to enter an integer here. You need to enter a string of characters here. Things like that. That's like a note. That's like putting a little sticky note on your sheet telling someone, yo, this is the way that you got to enter your data. A comment, on the other hand, is going to be someone visiting your sheet and leaving feedback on it, right? So notes are from you, the user. Comments are from actual viewers. Then there's also the document inspector. So all of these features by the way, are all going to be located when you go to your file here, right? If let's say I'm going to go to my open tab, or I'm sorry, sorry. All right, well, if I'm going to like new and I'm actually going to create a new tab, right? I can go essentially to my option pane, right? And see pretty much the info for all these guys. I could check for document inspector to see if there's any issues going on. I could check compatibility issues. I can make sure it works for all different devices. I can make sure it works for all kinds of things like that. Maybe it needs add-ins, right? It needs additional features that have to be downloaded from, let's say, the Microsoft Store, etc. Things like that. Maybe I want to change the version history, right? I could essentially go back a couple of iterations in case maybe I made a mistake and I want to go back to the last time I saved it. I could go back to the version history. Each one of these documents saves its version history on top of it. So in case it gets corrupted and you need to roll back an update, I can go to that version history and roll back the update from the last one. I actually had to do that from when I accidentally filtered my data, right? And I wasn't able to unfilter it, right? By that point, I already saved my worksheet. I closed it out and I wasn't able to just do Command Z and undo it. So instead, I went to my version history. I changed it back from before it was filtered, right? So that way it was not going to be in that format anymore. I got back the lost data. Okay. Our accessibility checker will provide errors and warnings where there might be issues, right? So in case it's difficult for someone maybe with low visibility to see, you'll either get an error for something that's really crucial or a warning for something that maybe isn't really the best. In fact, a lot of softwares have very similar accessibility checkers. Even Brightspace will have that. If I upload a PDF, it will actually pop up and say how accessible my PDF is for someone. Maybe it's not formatted very nicely, too many different colors that are hard to see. Maybe it's not in a format that a screen reader can read off of, right? When you're in a job, you want to make sure that everybody can access it, especially if it's going to be a public document. So this is very, very crucial to keep in mind. And it's something that you'll probably experience if you're going to be creating like public facing documents that the users are actually going to use. If something has a compatibility error, some possible errors might appear in that, and it'll actually rank them and show what will cause a significant loss of functionality or a minor loss of fidelity. All this is just saying is this is going to severely impact your experience, the intended experience. If I want my users to be able to use a function that is only available in the 2025 version of Excel, and I have users that are using the 2024 version of Excel, or maybe the 2017 version of Excel, maybe it's a legacy software, that's going to be a significant loss of functionality because they're not able to use that intended function. You want to have workarounds for those users that might have older software. You got to know your users essentially. Who's going to be using the document that you're creating, whether it's a template or whether it's just a workbook itself. Now, there's also minor losses too. This is like, say, maybe you have a custom font, and that font might not import very well or might not import at all to a certain computer. All right, big deal. Excel will just replace the font with something else. It's not the end of the world. But if there was a function, right, that function is crucial. Maybe it calculates the running average of your sales or something, but in a very certain way, and it used a like new version of a formula, right? If I lose that piece of data because of the version of Excel that I'm using, that is a problem. I don't want my formulas to not work on somebody's computer just because it's an older version. So we could actually see that this is a problem because this would not work for Excel 97, 1997 to 2003. Now, that's kind of old, I'll be honest. So maybe by now your company has hopefully evolved their tech fleet to something a little bit more recent than that. But it's good to know that you can compare the features that you're using now to past versions. Because this is a bit extreme, but maybe someone's still using like the 2012 version of Excel. I worked in IT a couple of summers and we had a lot of legacy products that were still using like Windows 10 and even Windows 7. All right. And this was like 2023, 2024, 2025. So that was kind of a pain when trying to get compatible software. Same with Excel. Some users could not access shared documents because of that. And of course, they had to call IT in and said, I can't access my document. And I had to ask them, well, what version of Excel are you using? And if they pop back and say something that's older than 5 years old, yeah, pal, you gotta update your computer at that point. Or the person that makes the Excel document itself needs to check their compatibility checker and make sure it works for users with those old computers. So, kind of a gamble here. If there's a lot of users that have those legacy products, then the person making the sheet better be adapting to those users. Okay. Comments, right? We went over comments and notes. These comments will appear from visiting users. A note, on the other hand, is something I leave. It's a little sticky note, quite literally, right? And it's just saying, okay, select your job or project, or select whatever it is. Maybe I'm telling the user only enter integers, only enter strings, whatever it is. This is a note that I put that's for the user. The comments are from the user back to me. So if this is important, if like, let's say I'm sharing a document, I want to show people how it works. I want to get their feedback on it, things like that. Uh, okay, I could set up the page. That's not too important. All right, so that is the end of kind of templates, options, sharing, that kind of stuff. Aside from that, let me see if there's anything else that I wanted to kind of go over. Um, I suppose I would also add to this a little bit by saying that the share tab here, there's a lot of different ways to share sheets. So be mindful of where exactly and how you're sharing it. For instance, I can essentially put this into my OneDrive, right? Maybe your company is using a OneDrive. And this will give me a link that I can share with other OneDrive users in my domain, right? My domain is CUNY. So anyone here with a CUNY address can have this book one. I could change it too, right? For instance, right? Maybe I'm using my Qmail instead, right? Which at this point is dead. So, but all of them both redirect to CUNY itself. So I don't necessarily have to worry about an outsider getting access to that. But maybe I'm sending a spreadsheet off to someone who's not in my domain. Maybe it's a potential client from another company. I have to be more careful with that. If I do that, I would rather not send a OneDrive link that's only accessible via that. I'd probably want to click the Send a Copy button instead. This will allow me to send it directly as an Excel workbook, or I could even download it as a universal PDF, right? Maybe not everyone uses Microsoft. In most businesses, they do, but maybe it's a Google-centric business, right? I could switch this to a PDF instead, right? I could email it as an attachment, or I could share it with a variety of different aspects depending on what device that I'm on, right? So if I'm sharing things, just be mindful. Am I sending a link instead over a cloud software? If so, make sure that the correct people can access it. Or am I sending a copy this way instead? Now, if you want to password protect this, right, you might feel inclined to do that beforehand, especially if you're sending the copy itself, because this would not be necessarily encrypted in any way, right? If I put it through OneDrive, at least I know no one who is not in the CUNY system will be able to access this. But otherwise, if I'm just sending this as an attachment, anyone can access it. And if that's really confidential information, maybe it shouldn't be sent without at least some security. At least password, but frankly, you might need to even send it through more of a secure email chain. But that depends on where you're working and things like that. But just be mindful of how you're sharing things as well. All right, with that being said, we are finished with that part. Let's see. All right, I'm going to open up a couple more of the questions to do. Let's do 1 and 2 questions. The first 2 questions, those are open. We will take we'll take about a 10-minute break. So we'll come back just before noon, and then we'll get into our next topic, which is actually going to be our last topic about macros. Okay, let me deal with that right now. I'm going to open up both the exam 1 from Pearson as well as the exam 2 on Brightspace. So I'll open that up right now. Okay, so it does say that students can review the test anytime after submitting on Pearson, so you should be able to access that. And let me change the second midterm as well. All right, and Brightspace midterm 2 should also be open. If you guys could just take a look, make sure you can access the questions on both of them, and then everything should be good. If anything is not open that I might have missed, just let me know, and I will open that up. Okay, Abriana. If anyone else is has that same issue or can try on their end, let me know as well. I just want to make sure if it's just an issue with one student or if it's a problem for everyone. If it ends up not working in the end, I can always send it off to you guys personally too. Okay, can review midterm two, but not midterm one. Okay. Let me take another look through that and see if there's another thing I can fix. Hey, try again now. I just switched a different setting on it. It might have opened it back up. If that doesn't work, I'll probably just post the questions and answers on Brightspace as a PDF. Oh, in the review section of Pearson, click the review to open it. Okay. All right. I'll look more into it at the end of class. So let's finish off for today, and then we will look more into that after. All right. So let's go through our questions really quick. So before sharing a workbook, what tool should you run specifically to check for and remove hidden metadata or personal information stored within the file? Okay. So we went over a couple different ways to check off our data, but since this is for removing hidden personal and metadata is just for data about data. This is going to be our document inspector, right? This is literally inspecting to make sure, hey, you didn't leave anything that shouldn't be left there. Okay, and then when running the accessibility checker, what specific level of feedback indicates that the content creates extreme difficulty or impossibility for uh, for persons with disabilities to review it correctly? So now this is going to be an error. This is not necessarily a warning. A warning would be something very small, right? Maybe, oh, the font's not big enough or something like that. But an error is going to be an extreme difficulty for these users. Great. So with that being said, our last topic is going to be about macros. So what exactly is a macros? This is essentially going to be kind of tying Excel and code together, right? You don't have to necessarily know a lick of code to use macros, but it's going to convert any actions you take into what's called VBA code. It's called Visual Basic. This is a coding language that is essentially very universal across a lot of different platforms. This is what a lot of Microsoft products use on their types of computers. So it's going to essentially work for kind of all different types of computers, Excel versions, etc. But basically, what's going to happen is we're going to use what's called a macro recorder. And it's going to essentially stream record all of the actions on our screen and convert it into code. So it sounds pretty magical, right? Like it's going to track what you're doing and immediately turn that into code. But think about what's kind of going under the shell, under the hood a little bit, right? Every action that you do in Excel is essentially equivalent to some piece of code, right? All computers are running on code. It is the only way for us to essentially communicate with the computer itself, right? That code is translating our actions, our words into specific code that the computer is able to understand at a binary ones and zeros level. So if we take a look, we're going to need to either enable this developer tab for more of the advanced features, or if I need to, I can instead go to my, hang on, I'll find it. Oh, view. Okay. Got lost on the ribbon there. So I could either put this developer tab in, which is not there by default. I'll go over how to get that in just a moment. Or I could go to my view tab, and this will have this little guy in the corner with macros. This will have three basic macros functions here. View macros will be for past macros that you've used. So these are going to be past recordings that you've done that have some sort of function code that Excel extracted from that. And you can use this on future sheets that you create. Record macro will allow us to actually create the code by doing all these kinds of actions, and use relative references, right? We know what relative references are. Those are changing references, right? Maybe I don't want to necessarily hard code an action to only work in A1, right? Maybe I want to have something that I do in A1 and I want to spread it down to all the other values as well. So this little macros tab in our view is going to have the three main functions. But let's say I want to add this developer tab. This has a lot more stuff here that is going to go a little bit more in depth with it, right? Depending on if you're on Mac or PC, this might be a little different. For a Mac, you want to go to the Excel here and you want to go to Preferences. If you go to Excel on the PC, it should be under Settings. You should probably get something very similar to this. Essentially, what you want to do is you want to go to the ribbon and toolbar. This is going to be the same place that we added in those automated features as well. Like the analysis features, all those extra add-ins, right? There's a lot of things you can add in here, right? But all we want is to go down here, right? And you're going to see by default, this little developer thing is going to be unchecked. You just want to check it, and boom, it's there. And this is going to have all of our stuff there to essentially be able to use it at any point. All right, so let's go over how exactly I'm going to create a macros itself, right? So I created one, I believe, earlier that is gone now. Super fun. So with that being said, let me just create some sample data, right? So heading 1, heading 2, and I'm just going to say A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, right? We don't need to do anything too crazy on this. It's totally fine. What I'm going to do though is I am going to duplicate this because I'm going to show essentially how I can pretty much just like kind of show how I can use whatever I'm going to create for one sheet onto another sheet. So let's create a macros, right? I'll go over here, right? And I want to record one, right? There's not going to be any macros over here. So I got to record one. So again, I could go to the developer tab and click here, or if I'm in the view tab, I could also record it here as well. So this is going to pop up this little bubble here, and I can name it. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to call it demo. There's a couple of different places that you can store this in now. This workbook is saying that this demo will only live in this workbook. So if I want to use these actions on a different workbook, I need to save it in what's called my personal macro workbook. This is tied to your Excel, your Microsoft account. So if I have, this is book one, and I'm going to do a completely different book. Maybe this is going to be my budget for June, and my next one is going to be for July, right? Two completely different Excel sheets. I want to save it to my personal macro book. And this will allow me to now use the macro I'm about to create on any future sheet that I intend to do. I can even create a shortcut to do this, right? You know how if I do Command C, Command V, I can copy and paste? Maybe this macro automatically formats it with colors and changes the font to something nice. And I want to have that as a shortcut. I can just code my own shortcut here by saying Option, Command, and maybe I want to change it to L or K or 0 or 1, something that doesn't conflict with an existing shortcut. But this is going to really make Excel kind of magical in a sense, because I can quite literally do the hard part on one sheet, maybe format it nice, do whatever I want, and with a single click, do that exact same formatting to something else. More efficient than just using plain old functions or anything like that. So I'm going to just click OK. And this is now going to start the recording itself, right? And I know it's recording because over here it says stop recording, right? So I'm recording. So all the actions that I click on and I do are going to be recorded onto this macro right now. It's not necessarily like a screen recording that it's like tracking my whole screen, but it's going to log my actions like a key logger. So I'm just going to do a couple of little formatting techniques, right? You could do as much or as little as you want, right? The possibilities are literally limitless. First, how about I make this heading bold and underlined, right? Let's make it way bigger too. Make it like 30. Let's change our width a little bit. Let's make this a little bigger too. This is kind of boring. How about we change our colors a little bit, right? We can change to, what was I looking for? Today is not my day. Oh my gosh. Oh, there we go. Cell styles, right? I could change it to all kinds of things if I want, right? Maybe I'm going to just change to, I don't know, maybe these guys down here. How about I make them a light blue and the heading I make a dark blue? Whatever it is. Oops, and you ruined my font. Thanks a lot, Excel. Okay, that's pretty good enough. And you know what I'm just gonna do? I'm gonna make a formula down here and just sum up all these guys, because why not? Nope, that's not what I meant. Oops. Okay, sum A from B2 through B4. Computer, please cooperate. Okay, aside from the mess ups and everything, we have a spreadsheet. We formatted it, whatever. This is kind of boring. How about I change this to another accent itself? Okay. All right, so let's just say this is all we want to do. We could do way more, we could do way less, but you can see I did this once, right? I'm going to stop my recording at this point. All right, go to View, Macros, Stop Recording. Your macro was successfully recorded. Now I'm going to show you where the magic will happen. I'm going to save the script, right? So maybe I made a mistake. I could always discard it too, but for this purposes, we're good. It tracked every single action that I did, right? It bolded, it underlined, it set the font, set the width, auto fit, all of this stuff. Applied a cell style, changed the font, remove the underline when I accidentally switched the cell style. All of those things were saved. Look, set cell B5 to a formula. All of that stuff has been saved, right? All right, cool. So what can I do with this, right? Well, let me first start by associating this to my workbook. Now, I have this sample data over here, right? I'm going to make a second copy of this just because I want to show two ways of doing it. First, how about I give it a run? All right. Magic! I clicked one button and look at this. This sheet is identical to this sheet. Amazing. Wow. Now, okay, what if I had slightly different data, but it's still in the same format, right? That's crucial because, again, I only formatted it for this specific range, right? 5, 6, 7. All right, everything else is the same. That's fine. Let's see how that goes. But this time, instead of just clicking the run button here, which, by the way, if I didn't have that over here, I could go to this tab, view macros, and I see personal, Excel, SB, whatever, demo. This is what I created. I can run it this way instead, right? I could even step through it, right? If I step through it, this is really cool. It pops up the Visual Basic code itself. Now, if you're not a CS major, you never touched code, you're probably like, what am I looking at? Guess what? You don't need to know a lick of code for this. This is what Excel is doing in the background. But hey, maybe you want to do the coding yourself. You want to write in Visual Basic? Look at this. You can do all of this stuff yourself. You can set all these parameters yourself. All of this is just all what we've done in code. And we can take a look over here. All of the objects, all the sheets are labeled as what we call sub-procedures. They're subfolders, right? So I can run this macro, right, sub demo on any of these sheets, right? I can recreate this as many times as I want. I could run it, I could step through it, I could change things, right? Because this was automatically generated by Excel, right? All right, we don't need to worry about that debugging right now because it works, but maybe it didn't. You can step through it and do it that way. Now, what's something really cool is maybe someone who doesn't know Excel doesn't know that they can do this. How about I add a button for them? Oh yeah, I added a button. So now I click the button, and this button, of course, my computer decides that it wants to crash at this point, but this button would have actually run the macro itself, right? Fortunately, I can't seem to move it for some reason. Let me see. Maybe it just was put into a different place. Okay. Command click. Control click. All right. For some reason, it does not want to work today, but if I wanted to instead do it manually, go to this developer tab and I can add buttons in manually, right? Let's say I want to add this button. I associate the demo that I want with it, right? And I can say where I want it coming from. I stored it in the personal one so I can use it for any sheet that I want, right? Now if I click on this, ta-da! Button, click, and boom. Even with different data, notice it's formatted it the same exact way while keeping my data. That is the magic of macros. I do it once, I record it, I can make a button and have people click the button. Maybe a button will change the color. Someone wants to make their spreadsheet red, blue, green. As silly as that sounds, you could have macros controlled by buttons that let you change the color using one click, right? You just code it up once and boom. just make sure that your sheet is the same format. Because if I had an extra row over here, it would not work the same way. It would only format up to here, right? So if I'm using like a budget sheet that keeps the same format every single time, I'm good. But if I have something like this where maybe it changes, maybe I have more names, maybe I have less names, whatever, then I got to be careful because that macro might not work for the entire row. But hey, we know how to go into our Visual Basic editor, right? I just went to Developer, Visual Basic, and I can change the code. Look, range A1, B1, change the range. We know how to do that. Change the code, right? You don't need to understand what any of this means. You know what a range is. You know what it's doing, right? Because you did the actions, right? Just change the parameters and you can do it. So that is macros in a nutshell. Okay, we did that. Record a macro. Sometimes it might, if there's a worksheet that has a macro, it may tell you a security warning. Just be mindful. Remember, macros is code. People can make code that hacks your account, does things like that. Don't open spreadsheets you don't know where they come from, right? Don't open files that you don't know where they come from, things like that. I think that's pretty common sense. I'm not saying that, oh my gosh, this is going to cause your computer to get hacked. Absolutely not. You're okay to do the project. It's totally safe. But just be mindful, macros is code, right? And that code could delete your entire spreadsheet. Be careful of what you're importing and always have backups. Okay, don't need to worry about that. All right, we went over the different buttons. There's a lot of other things too, right? I just use plain old buttons, but you can explore a little bit, use all kinds of other buttons, radio buttons. Those are just like the little circles that you see on like forms and stuff, etc. These are within the insert form controls. On mine, it looks a little different just because I'm on a newer version of Excel on a Mac. They're all right here. I could even use Excel add-ins, all kinds of things like that. If you want these features, make sure you have the developer tab. Otherwise, your view will have your basic macros experience, right? And okay, procedure is the procedure itself. Sub-procedure is going to perform the action on the workbook itself, right? So, okay, VBA editor, this is what we also went over itself, right? Sub-procedure. This is the procedure that we defined. We can put this on to other sheets right there. And yeah, none of this is really too relevant. I wouldn't worry too much about the code itself. You're not here to learn VBA, you're here to learn Excel. Just knowing how to use macros in general, recording your screen and doing a bunch of stuff is totally, totally valid. You don't need to code range H7, do the date, make a font bold. The computer is doing that yourself. If you're interested in code, it's good to know. Maybe any CS people over here might find it very interesting, but all you need to know for macros is literally just pretty much how to create a macros and record one and access it, right? That's pretty much it. Okay, so that is the end of that. So again, today was a little bit less content for the exam and for projects and everything. Just really take away what are templates, how can we create them, how can we use them, what is a macro, how do we use it, why do we use it, things like that. So that is pretty much that. Okay, so with that being said, I will open up the rest of the questions. And if you have any questions about any topics, I will be happy to answer them. And if you want to ask in the chat, I'm going to just review the answers in the Amplify really quick to see if there's any things that we can go over in the meantime. Okay. All right. If you're going to have enough time on the exam, you absolutely will. All right. If you take longer than the 2 hours, I will stay later, right? You can stay a little later if you need a couple minutes extra. It's not a problem at all. Don't even worry about it. Um, Most of you guys finished the other exams pretty quickly, so you should be okay. Yes, you have access to both previous exams by now. I opened the Pearson one. Please check to make sure that works. I'm really hoping that it does. I tried something else to open it, so it should be good. If it doesn't, let me know. I will just download it as a PDF and upload it to Brightspace. You should be able to review the questions that you got wrong, which is important, right? You want to make sure where you can learn from where you were wrong. The other exam is on Brightspace. That was also just opened as well. You should be able to access that as well. Please go through your old exams. There will likely be repeated questions. If you have problems, let me know. You can bring as many pages as you want for the note for your notes. Just remember, no computers, phones, anything like that allowed. It has to be printed, handwritten, has to be paper, basically. But bring as much as you'd like. I would recommend not to just print out all the slides, to be honest. I think that's kind of a waste of paper, and it's going to be a lot to kind of go through during the exam. I think work to make your notes work for you. Still cannot access midterm one. All right, I'm going to just download it then and just post it onto Brightspace. Just make sure that you can access midterm two if that's the case. But yeah, I'll just upload it to Brightspace if you guys are having trouble accessing midterm one.
Professor,
Yes, what's up?
I can't access midterm two, but I have midterm one.
Interesting. You know what? I'm just gonna post both. Yeah, give me a few minutes at the end of class and I'll just post both of them, just as PDFs. Will there be a study guide available? Yes, I will get that going for you guys as well. You have study guides for the first two exams. So I will make one for chapters 9 through 12, and then you'll have everything that you need for that. So if you want to print the study guide out, by all means, maybe that's a nice idea. Print out notes. Just bring something that works for you, right? You don't want to be spending the entire time rifling through your notes. You just want to use it as a backup in a sense, like, oh, I know where to find this. I know where to refer to this. Because that's how it works in real life, you know? If you know where to find it, you can find it like that. Okay. As for the structure of the exam, it will be entirely multiple choice. The structure of the exam will be pretty much identical to the past exams. So, quite literally, um, pretty much exactly like how exam one and exam two is, just instead of on the computer, it's on paper. Um, there won't be any matching questions. It just will be only multiple choice. Unfortunately, those matching questions have kind of caused a bit of issues, as well as those fill in the blank questions. So only multiple choice. So take a look at the questions that we've done, right? Take a look at the quizzes, right? Those extra credit quizzes. Take a look at the exams. Any of those multiple choice questions will be a very good uh, study guide for the exam. Okay. I see there's some questions. Pivot table and or if statements, ANOVA and the functions. ANOVA will not be on the final at all. So don't worry about that. Pivot tables and or if statements and the functions. All right. With the functions, what I would recommend is just kind of take a look at the functions we've gone over, right? And in your notes that you end up bringing, write out the function, right? Write out why you use it, when you use it, and just kind of the overall structure of that. You're not going to really be asked to like fill in the blanks on functions, but just really understanding why you use functions, right? Um, I'll be honest, the only functions that you would actually be tested on are ones that we've spent quite a lot of time on for. So don't really worry about anything that we haven't spent a lot of time on or anything that's particularly difficult. I'm not going to ask you guys any of the financial functions. I'm not going to ask you guys anything crazy like PMT. It's going to be pretty simple things. Some average, maybe average A versus regular average, right? Things like that. Nothing too crazy, right? It's very similar in structure and difficulty to the past exams. Um, so it should be pretty doable. For pivot tables, right, the only thing that would probably be asked for those, like, why do we use a pivot table? What is a pivot table? How do I get data from a pivot table, right? That's the get pivot data function, right? Things like that. And an or statements, right? I can link two things together, right? Let's say I have two conditions. It has to be the state New York and the date is June 23rd, right? I can link those together using an and statement, right? So I could say something like, if the state is equal to New York and the date is equal to June 23rd, right? This is going to ensure that I have to satisfy both conditions. Both must be true. Or, on the other hand, is going to be at least one of the conditions, or both, right? The way I love to think about and or is, if you ever been to Olive Garden, they have those unlimited soup, salad, or breadsticks, right? So you're able to always get breadsticks, right? It's breadsticks and your choice of soup or salad. So that means I can't get breadsticks, soup, and salad. It's breadsticks and soup or breadsticks and salad, right? That's kind of the difference going on there, right? So I can't really necessarily get all three of them. I can't be greedy in that way. But I can get breadsticks and my choice of something else. Awesome. Okay. For multi-dimensional equations, I see another question. Don't worry too much about that. Honestly, focus more on references. Definitely a lot about absolute versus relative references. I don't think I'm going to really ask anything about multi-dimensional, asking about like, if anything, just knowing how do I reference data on other sheets using multi-dimensional equations. That's the extent of that kind of external workbook references. For Power Query, don't worry about specific steps for that. Just kind of know how, like, why we use Power Query, right? We learned from the last time that we essentially take our data, right? And we want to clean the data up. Maybe I'm taking data from two different sheets, right? I'm combining it into one. And maybe I want to essentially take the data from one, merge it with the data from another, maybe take the sum of it, do things like that. Power Query allows me to clean my data nicely and put it in a nice format that I choose, right? So that's all really Power Query is kind of doing. And that's probably the extent of what I'd probably be asking for that too. Okay. For specific topics, I think it'll be probably better to kind of go over the sheets themselves. Um, Kind of have to head out a little earlier today, but tomorrow I will maybe go over a little bit of a review of the sheet oh my gosh, sorry, I can't speak today. Of the sheet itself, if anyone has specific questions. Otherwise, if you guys need me to answer any questions over email, I absolutely can. Let me go over the these questions before we finish. Oh, sorry. Is there a question? Okay. Let's go over these before we call it a day. I want to just make sure we get through these and everything. By default, Excel stores recorded macros in this workbook. However, if you want a macro to be available for use in any Excel workbook you open, where should you choose to store it? This is going to be a personal macro workbook. So it's being coded in the Visual Basic editor, right? But by default, it's only accessible in this workbook. Now, I only used my macro on one book, but if I wanted to, right? If I opened a separate book, this my macros is going to be inside that personal macro workbook. So I can immediately use it for any other use that I essentially choose, right? So it's very handy for essentially putting data, formatting it, even in completely different workbooks. Okay, next question. All right, so VBA project organizes its components inside specific containers, right? We kind of saw it similar to this, just a little bit differently formatted here, but that's okay. So draw a blue rectangle around the container where standard macro sub-procedures are stored, right? These are these guys over here, right? So we can run our sub-procedures on any of these dudes over here. Individual worksheets are going to be specific worksheets of these guys, right? So when I pulled up over here, I saw each of these guys was its own sub-procedure, right? All of my sub-procedures are here, and I can run these procedures on any of these individual sheets. Which type of procedures performs specific actions on a workbook but does not return specific values? This is going to be our sub-procedure. So think about it. Returning a value, what does that mean? When we have a function, it's going to be equals, let's say, sum of something, and it's returning a number. A macro's sub-procedure is just changing things. It's changing the format. It's not returning anything. It's just changing something here. So that's different than the normal functions that we've done. That's why this is called a procedure, not a function. So that's the difference between what we were using with macros, aka VBA programming, Visual Basic Programming. These sub-procedures are just changing things without returning values, unlike a function itself. All right, with that being said, that has been our last lecture. If you guys have any questions, happy to answer, but otherwise, that'll be all. And we got tomorrow's lab, review a little bit, and then we will start our exam. And I will be sure to upload the two exams, the two past exams onto Brightspace just as PDFs so you can just access them. And then also the study guide as well. So you guys will be all prepared, you'll be all good, and you don't have to worry about anything like that. If you have questions, problems with grades, etc., please don't hesitate to email me. And we'll see you guys tomorrow. It's actually going to be funny because a lot of you guys will be here in person for the first time. So, yeah. And if you can, please fill out the end of course survey. Would love to hear from you guys. With that being said, let me stop the recording.